My mother kicks me out because I don't want to share my college fund with my step-siblings. She doesn't like what happens next either. So, a bit of background before getting into what happened. I am a 17-year-old girl living with my mother, who is 43, my stepfather, and my 2 step-siblings. I have a younger stepbrother and stepsister, but we are not close. My stepbrother, let's call him Jackson, is a year older than me, and my stepsister Emma is 2 years younger than me. We all go to the same high school, but we don't have mutual friends and have never been close. My mother married their father after dating for almost 5 years. The wedding was 3 years ago, but our families have been living together for 6 years. The wedding was just a formality. As for my father, he unfortunately passed away when I was very young, so I never got to spend much time with him. I barely remember him because I was very young when he passed away. My parents never married, and my father's family did not approve of my mother because she was a bit of a party girl and did not have a good reputation back in their hometown. So they lived together for a short time, but did not marry because his parents would have probably cut him off. He was diagnosed with late-stage leukemia when he was only 27, and by the time they found out, it was too late to do anything. Fortunately, he had time to put his affairs in order and managed to set up an educational fund for me for after he was gone so I wouldn't have to worry, and my mother wouldn't have to struggle so much after he passed away. I've always known about this since his lawyers told me when I was old enough to understand these things. My father's lawyer controlled the money, but after I turned 18, I would have full control over the fund. For a long time after my dad died, it was just me and my mom, and I got used to it. Then my stepfather came into the picture when I was around 8, and after dating for a while, we all moved in together. My mother had moved out of the town where we used to live because she said it was too painful to live in the same place where she and my dad had met, although I think it was because of her reputation. I never met my grandparents on my father's side because they never showed any interest in meeting me. Occasionally, we visit my mom's parents, and they are nice enough, but my mom's family is not really close-knit. So when I moved in with my stepfather and his kids, I had high hopes because I thought I was finally going to have a big, happy family. But unfortunately, my new family didn't live up to that, and I don't blame them for it, but it was quite disappointing for me. When I was younger, it wasn't that they made me feel unwelcome or treated me badly, but there was just something really off about the energy of everyone. We all lived together, but it never really felt like a family, and I never connected with either my stepfather or his kids. We lived in the same house, but they never made a real effort to make me feel comfortable or get to know me. I tried several times, but they didn't seem very enthusiastic, so I gave up after trying for a couple of months. I accepted that we were more like roommates than a real family, and that was that. I didn't idealize it. My mother, however, was a different story because they treated her differently. That energy towards my mom was completely different, and they really treated her as part of the family. I could be very wrong here, but I feel like part of the reason my step-siblings and stepfather were happy to include my mom and pretend to be a happy family with her and exclude me was because my stepfather's ex-wife had been a nightmare. I never met her personally, but I've heard about her, and from what I've heard, she was a total gold digger who left my stepfather almost penniless after the divorce. He had to rebuild his life from scratch, and to make things worse, he also had to take care of my step-siblings on his own. Their mother gave up custody and abandoned them to go off with her new lover shortly after the divorce. Finding a woman like my mother, who is the exact opposite of his ex-wife, was probably great for all of them, but I was not really necessary in that scenario, and that's exactly how they made me feel. I can't pinpoint it, and I can't think of examples right now, but it was just based on vibes and energy. I always had that feeling that despite being part of the family, I was not really part of the family. My only comfort was the fact that I might be overthinking things, and that's what I used to tell myself whenever things got a bit tough for me. It feels strange to say this, but I was actually a bit jealous because I felt my mother had finally found her people, but I was not included. I don't think that's a good feeling for a child, but that's how my childhood was. I started to resent all of them after a few years because it was like they had left me behind or something. I never mentioned it to anyone because it always seemed trivial and pointless, so I didn't want to make a big deal out of it by saying something, and that's how life was. I wasn't okay with it, but I was content. Now, getting to what happened a few days ago. I've been looking at colleges for the past few weeks because I'm supposed to graduate in a few months, and I need to start sending out applications. I wasn't worried about money because, as I said, my mother always told me there was a fund set aside for me, and that's what I was going to use. But then, a few days ago, my mother said she needed to talk to me about something very important. She told me that my stepfather had not been able to save money for his kids to go to college, so she needed me to help out the family and let my step-siblings use the money from my college fund as well. Jackson had taken a gap year and was about to start college at the same time as me, so that's what the conversation was really about. Legally, my mother couldn't control the funds because, in his will, my father made it clear that only I could control my money after I turned 18. And if I'm honest, I didn't want to share the money with my step-siblings. For one, I didn't consider them family, and I'm sure they didn't either. And second, even if I didn't end up using the entire amount my father left for me, I would still like to use the fund for myself. That kind of money could really help me get a good start and be useful for me when I get my own apartment and things like that, until I start earning my own money. Also, I had already saved a lot since I went to a public school instead of a private one, and my mother didn't have to spend money on my education until now. I was also a very good student, so I was expecting to get a scholarship at whichever university I decided to apply to and enroll in. Money had never been a concern for me, but now that I was becoming an adult and was about to turn 18 in a few months, I was starting to think about saving and earning money. Giving money from my funds to my step-siblings didn't seem like a good idea to me. So, I told my mom that I wouldn't be sharing those funds with them because I didn't think it was necessary. If Jackson really wanted to go to college, he could simply do what millions of kids do anyway, and get a student loan. My mom was not happy with my response and said I was being selfish, and I didn't disagree. I was actually being selfish and saw nothing wrong with it. So instead of arguing with her, I just told her that I was being selfish and was completely fine with it, because I didn't consider my step-siblings family. That's when my mom started yelling at me, apparently believing that what I said was nothing short of a criminal offense. It took me a few seconds to process the fact that she was losing her mind simply because I had told the truth and said I didn't consider my step-siblings family. The double standards were incredible, because on one hand, the family had treated me like an outsider for the last 8 years, and she never seemed to notice, or maybe she did and just didn't care. But when it came to me, I had to consider them family and treat them as such without any reason. I tried to talk to her calmly and without yelling in her face, but it was pointless because she was already out of control, calling me ungrateful and other things. So I waited for her to finish yelling at me, and then I told her she could yell at me all she wanted, but I wasn't going to change my mind. The only thing yelling was going to achieve was to alienate me even more and make me feel even less inclined to help them in any capacity. My mom calmed down a bit after I said that, and I thought we were finally going to have a rational discussion where I could express my feelings, but that was naive of me. I had forgotten that in that house, my feelings didn't matter at all. The only thing that mattered was if my mom, my stepdad, and my step-siblings were happy. My happiness was not important to any of them. So after my mom calmed down, she told me I had a week to decide, but after that, she would be forced to kick me out of the house. I thought she was joking because it was simply ridiculous, but she told me she wasn't, and since my birthday was near, in less than a month, she wouldn't even be legally obligated to let me live with them anymore because I wouldn't be a minor. So I would be out of the house and completely alone if I didn't agree to share the college fund, which, I reiterate, my father had created specifically for me with my step-siblings. I could hardly believe that my own mother would say something like that and put me in such a difficult position just for the sake of my step-siblings when I was supposed to be her own daughter. It seemed that being okay with her new husband was more important than her daughter, and now I understood that. She told me to be careful and think about this because this decision could cost me everything, and then she left the room while I sat there trying to process what she had just said. It was incredibly insulting for me to be treated that way by my own mother, and that day I decided to leave that house no matter the cost. So I started talking to my friends and told them I needed help finding my own apartment because I planned to move out by my 18th birthday. I told them everything my mom had said and explained the urgency of the situation. I knew that once I turned 18, I would get all the money and then be able to control where I spent it. Yes, I would have to stick to a budget and choose my career and college carefully, but it was worth it because that meant I could at least move out and live on my own instead of enduring my family, or rather, forcing them to tolerate me. Because after that conversation with my mom, it was clearer than ever that I wasn't welcome in that house at all, and had really been an afterthought all these years. I hadn't been overthinking anything. In fact, I might have been underestimating things because I never saw this coming. A few days passed, and a friend told me she had managed to talk to a cousin who was also applying to the same colleges as me because we had an interest in the same field. She planned to live in an apartment because she wanted to be independent from the start, and my friend suggested I get in touch with her so that if we ended up going to the same college, we could rent an apartment together and live there. I thought it was a great idea and got in touch with my friend's cousin almost immediately. We sorted everything out, and I also told her my situation, and she seemed very understanding, and I could see she was a good person, and we would get along well. So that part was resolved, and the only thing I had to worry about was where I would live until college started, as there were still several months to go. But it turned out to be quite easy for me to resolve that because my friends told me I could go live with them until college finally started. It was a complicated and risky plan, but I was willing to go through with it because anything would be better than living with my mom and these people. Because the way they were treating me after that fight with my mom was horrible. And I don't mean horrible in the sense that they were talking badly to me or torturing me or anything, but what they were doing was much more humiliating. Everyone had banded together against me and acted like I was the most disgusting creature that had ever existed. Like if I walked into a room, everyone would instantly stop talking and go back to their own rooms. They gave me sidelong glances all the time and refused to even talk to me as if I had done something wrong. It was humiliating, and I felt like running away because it just felt so bad. It took me a while to find something for myself, but I decided that as soon as my friends were ready to take me in, I would leave this place. So the day my mom spoke to me again to ask if I had changed my mind, I decided to tell her the truth and then leave. I told her that I hadn't changed my mind and that I was really going to leave this place. I told her that the way she and her family had been treating me over the past week was nothing short of psychotic, and I couldn't keep putting up with it. I told her I had already talked to a couple of friends and would be living with them until I could start college and move out of here. I told her I never wanted to see her again, so she was free to throw me out, and I wouldn't care. I already had a plan in mind. So it didn't surprise me much when my mother yelled at me again and told me I needed to get out of her house because it wasn't a place for selfish and ungrateful girls like me. I left quite happily and was glad to see them for the last time, but that wasn't the end of the road for my plan. During the time I spent in my room completely alone, I had been thinking of ways to get back at my mother. Since she married my stepfather, life had changed for me, and not in a good way, but she didn't even seem to care because she was happy with her new family. I had tried to be happy for her and suppress my own feelings about it, but now it was very obvious that she didn't care about me at all, and her stepchildren were more important to her than I was. The way she had been treating me made me feel awful, and I had decided that I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. So that's why, as soon as I left the house, I decided to tell the whole truth about her and let everyone know what kind of person she really was. The only reason I even waited a week to leave her house and then talk about her ridiculous demands was that I didn't want her to have any access to me to even tell me how disappointed she was in me or whatever. Because no one in their right mind would ever support the things she had said to me, so when everyone found out, a storm would start for her. So once I had moved in with a friend, I decided to go on my social media and make a post about my mother. I wrote about the incident that took place, and how my mother had been yelling at me just because I didn't want to contribute to her stepchildren's college fund. I also mentioned that none of them had ever treated me like family, but my mother never seemed to have a problem with that. It was only a problem when I did the same to them. I gave more details than in this post, recounting specific incidents where I felt completely excluded. I talked about the double standards. I also mentioned how she had practically forgotten about me once she started living with her new family. And I also said that I found her to be the most selfish creature on this planet due to the way she had been behaving with me just for saying no to something completely ridiculous. Any sane person in my position would have said no, as the money she was talking about had been left specifically for me by my father. It wasn't for anyone else to use, and I didn't think it was fair to demand that I share it with people who never made me feel like part of their family. I might have even considered it if my step-siblings had been kind to me at some point, but that wasn't the case here. I was really frustrated and let out all my frustration in that one post. I knew this would negatively affect my mother, since she had a lot of people following her, including my father's friends and their children. But at that moment, I simply didn't care and wanted to get back at her. To be honest, she had been my only source of support and happiness throughout my life, because I only had one parent to rely on, and my grandparents weren't really in touch with me. She had been my first and most important friend, So when she chose my step-siblings over me, it felt like a huge betrayal. I was really hurt and just wanted to get it all out of my system without worrying about the consequences. So I made that post, and exactly what I expected to happen happened. I received several messages from my mother saying I had ruined her life because everyone had seen that post, and it had been shared numerous times. My mother was quite popular in her circle of friends, so it was no surprise that people were just looking for an excuse to talk about her, and I had thrown fuel on the fire. She tried calling me several times, but I didn't answer any calls or respond to any texts. I was just very sad and had hoped that making that post would make me feel less upset. But the messages my mother sent me after that only made me feel worse about my decision. I could tell from her messages that she was really devastated by this. She said things like she never expected me to do something like this, that she had raised me to be kind and compassionate. But I was the opposite of both, and she couldn't even believe I was her daughter. And then she pulled out the big one and told me that if my father were alive today to witness this vengeful and malicious side of me, he would be terribly disappointed and wouldn't even want to be related to me. That really hit me hard, and I felt like I was doing something horrible. I started to rethink everything, and that's what finally brought me here. And at this point, I don't even know if it was right for me not to want to share my college fund with my step-siblings. I don't know if I should try to make things right with my mother and the others, because I don't even know if I can face them after what I did. But also, this could be a very clever way to try to manipulate me, and if it is, it's definitely working. That's why I need you all to help me, because now that you have the facts, you can give me your unbiased point of view. So, am I the bad one for refusing to share my college fund with my step-siblings and then making a post against my mother? Update 1. First of all, thank you very much for the response. Many of you sent me really kind messages, and that made me feel better about myself and what I did. I guess I needed that to see things as they are. I was about to give my mother another chance just because I wanted to see the good in her and wanted to believe she wasn't a bad person. But what kind of mother says and does the things she did? She's simply not a good person, and it's time for me to accept that instead of trying to fight it. So I blocked her to make sure she couldn't contact me again. I knew that if she texted me again, it would only be to manipulate me or to make that post go away. I don't want to delete that post. I want it to stay up at least until she apologizes to me. She knows where I am because my friend's mother told her I was living with them, so she knows where to find me. And despite knowing this, if she doesn't reach out to me, I'll take it as a sign that she doesn't care about me and that she's more concerned about her own reputation. Update 2. So, it's been 2 weeks since I've been living with my friend and moved out of my stepfather's house. After that post, I had absolutely no contact with anyone in my family. I went to school for a couple of days and saw Emma a few times, but she just gave me a really nasty look and pretended I wasn't even there. It's not surprising considering the fact that they are practically experts at pretending I don't exist. They've been doing it for the past 8 years, so they must have found it easier now. Anyway, my mother finally came to visit me yesterday afternoon. She arrived here with a black plastic bag that people usually use for garbage and left it in the living room, saying it had all my remaining things in it, basically everything I couldn't pack in my bag when I left home. I felt a bit insulted that she had used a garbage bag to pack my things, and it was much more insulting when she dumped it all on the living room floor, leaving me to pick it up. My friend and her parents, who saw all this, were horrified. They didn't like my mother's behavior at all and really took the time to argue with her about it. They told her that considering the fact that I was her only daughter, she should have more compassion for me instead of treating me like trash. They really scolded her, but she didn't take it well. She told them they had no right to talk about how to raise her daughter when they were the ones harboring a delinquent like me. I almost laughed when she said that because I was far from being a delinquent. I was literally an outstanding student, and she knew it. I almost mentioned it myself, but I didn't have to, thanks to my friend who defended me. She told that to my mother, and also that she was grateful her parents were nothing like my mother and had a heart. It turned into a kind of fight where my friend's parents threatened to call the police, so, reluctantly, she left. I was really grateful for my friend and her parents. I don't think it was really necessary for them to take my side, but they did, and I couldn't be happier about it. This is probably the first time in my life that I have someone who fights for me on my behalf, and it was really touching. But anyway, I don't think my mother will come back soon because after the welcome she received yesterday, she wouldn't dare show up here again. And I really hope she doesn't show up because I'm tired of the drama now. I want to move on with my life and start a new chapter. but I can't do that if she keeps showing up over and over again. So I hope this is the last time I encounter her. Update 3. Hello again. It's been a long time since we last saw each other. I haven't updated in quite a while, I think a couple of months, but you can't blame me for that. It was because I was applying to universities and trying to get into a good one with a scholarship. I've been working really hard, and it all paid off. I'm in my first choice of university, and yes, I'm following the plan I came up with a couple of months ago. My friend's cousin, who is also applying to the same universities, was also accepted here, and we are going to rent an apartment and live together. She is a very sweet girl, and the fact that she is my friend's cousin is just the icing on the cake because this way, I can keep in touch with everyone. I know many are waiting for an update on my mother and not how I'm doing in life, but don't worry, I have something to tell you about her. But since it's a bit long, I left it for the end. My mother showed up again at my friend's house, and this time things got really ugly. She was yelling, demanding that I delete the post I made and write a public apology. I think she woke up very optimistic that day, because it was clear that after all that, it wasn't going to happen. She was literally calling me ungrateful and other very unpleasant things, while demanding like a good narcissist that I help her fix her life, because the post was affecting her a lot. By then, I was a bit unsure of what to do because everything happened so fast, and I didn't know if she could get more violent. The situation escalated quickly and turned into a big fight. There was struggling, yelling, and a lot of chaos. At one point, she grabbed my arm and started dragging me as if she were kidnapping me. All the while, she was yelling for me to delete the post. My friend's parents finally called the police to intervene, in addition to helping me break free, because the situation was out of control. The craziest thing about all this is that my friend was recording a video of the whole scene with her phone. When she told me, I couldn't believe it, but I decided to upload it to my social media. So now, not only is there a post telling everyone how she treated me all these years, but also a video with evidence. I even hope some YouTube channel picks up this story so that what my mother did to me goes viral and gets even worse. When the police arrived, she had already calmed down a bit, but anyway, my friend's parents explained to the officers what had happened, so they took her away. After I found out my friend had recorded the video, I thought about using it as evidence, but honestly, I didn't have the strength or desire to waste my energy on my mother. After all, I don't know if I can even consider her that. Besides, the video is on my social media, and I don't know if it can be used as evidence. If it can, perfect, but I don't want to know anything more about her. I know many expect a stronger revenge against my mother, but if you were in my shoes, you'd probably be as exhausted as I am from so many years of living through this, so the best thing for me is to cut all ties with her. Especially because now I have moved to the university and won't have her around.